Okay, from it. Okay, Stephen?
Bhante, I have a question about what you spoke about, the three types of liberated beings.
Yeah.
And what may be called the sort of self-evident Dhamma.
The what?
The sort of self-evident nature of the Dhamma. For instance, is it conceivable that somebody who lives or lived in a place where the teachings of the Buddha never went, say like ancient South American civilizations, is it possible that somebody there would have sort of become what we might call a stream enterer just by kind of realizing some aspects of Dhamma because it's sort of the way it is?
Yeah. First, to be a stream enterer, okay, that is the first stage in becoming a Shravaka Arahat, a disciple Arahat. So to become a stream enterer, you would have to have heard the Dhamma through the lineage descending from the Buddha. But the question, I think you should rephrase the question, is it possible to become a Pacceka Buddha? That's the Pacceka Buddha is the one who realizes the Dhamma without depending upon the lineage of teaching coming from the Buddha.
Well, I was just trying to be more modest, just a step along the way.
Let's just raise the question, is it possible to become a Pacceka Buddha living in some other civilization?
Yeah, because I mean, it seems to me that the Dhamma shouldn't be only limited to the Buddha's own teaching, because it's just the way things are. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the realization of Dhamma is not limited only to the Buddha's own teaching, in that Pacceka Buddhas arise independent of the Buddha's teaching. You know, they discover the truth for themselves without depending on the Buddha's teaching. So it's sort of the position of the commentaries, I think. They will say that Pacceka Buddhas arise only in Jambudvipa. Jambudvipa is the greater Indian subcontinent. But, you know, whether we have to accept the commentaries on that I don't know. It's an open question. I can't say whether it's possible or not.
Okay, thank you.
But it would seem that if the truth of things is, as you say, self-evident, if somebody investigates and inquires, of course they would have to realize the truth, they would have to know and develop the appropriate methods of mind training to gain samadhi, to have a culture that emphasizes samadhi. And that is something particular to Indian civilization, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know. It's a question I can't answer. Yeah.
Bhante, does Pacceka Buddha subdivided into dry liberated both way?
No, I think Pacceka Buddhas are always... I don't know. I don't
Thank
know,
you,
actually.
Bhante, I have a question regarding the split of the Sangha. But my question is that from the historical point of view, I mean, the split up of Sangha and the different tensions, I mean, exist in the whole history of the Buddhism. Yeah. So how could one acquire the view that we are not split the Sangha?
Okay, first I think that statement in the text is made at a period when there is already a unified, harmonious Sangha, when there are not divisions. Okay, then the divisions that took place with the historical development of Buddhism, first division of the early Sangha into different schools, Mahasangika, Savastivada, Mula Savastivada, Kashyapya, and so on. I'm not sure that we would say that those divisions that took place are evidence of schism in the Sangha. What's called schism is when there is a conflict of such a nature that the monks won't perform Sangha kammas, the Sangha rituals with one another. And those are rather differences in doctrinal interpretations that developed over the course of Buddhist history. Whether we call them schism or not, that I'm not so sure. I think Henry has.
Bhante, this morning you talk about a person who was with Buddha, but keep holding the view that other practice are arahat, like the dog eating, they are arahat.
Right, yeah.
Eventually he left Buddha.
Yeah.
So I wonder, have Buddha rejected him, or this is the way Buddha would teach him? But either the student is not. I'm wondering why not Buddha teach him the right view, and then give him.
I think the Buddha must have tried to to instruct him and to guide him into right understanding, but he must have been very adamant in his fixation on the view that these practitioners who indulge in extreme types of asceticism are arahats. And so he refused to give up that view. And therefore, because of the strength of his attachment to that view, he left the Buddha. The Buddha didn't reject him and send him away.
You mean the Buddha didn't reject him, but he left?
Yeah, he left on his own, of his own accord.
Okay, thank you.
Question, if the accomplished person, I think the person accomplished in view, is studying the nature of the 5 skandhas with the, quote, inherent awareness, then is it that same mind that realizes its own transient nature? I don't know where the expression inherent awareness came. I don't think I used that expression. But, okay, when the person is contemplating the rise and fall of the 5 aggregates, in the course of contemplation, he also has to contemplate that the mind that is observing the arising and falling away of the 5 aggregates, that mind is also arising and passing away, and therefore that it's transient. So this is called reflexive insight. So, say at the first level of insight, insight level 1, one is contemplating the arising and passing away of an object. Suppose one is observing a sensations in the body, so one is observing the arising and passing away of sensations. But then, to complete the process of contemplation, at a certain point, one has to turn the beam of awareness back upon itself and also observe and note the arising and passing away of that mind that is observing the arising and passing of the sensations. And so the mind of observation then becomes the object of a later, even momentarily later, mind of observation. And so you have a sort of flipping back and forth between observing rise and fall of primary object, then observing the rise and fall of the observing mind. And that way one eliminates the tendency to view the observing mind, as some kind of persisting observer, a stable subject of the experience. And so the observing mind then becomes sort of pulled under the rug of impermanence. Okay, any further questions?
A question. In the morning, you also said that in the Upanishad tradition, the sages has come to a conclusion that there is a prevailing, underlying, pure consciousness,
Yeah.
and they call it Atta.
Yeah,
And Buddha rejected that.
yeah,
But the Buddha does say that there is consciousness and then there is enlightenment. There's a consciousness,
yeah,
which is when the enlightened being, they
yeah.
on that. So does Buddha replace Atta with other things as the pure consciousness? Or just reject that notion that there is a permanent, unchanging consciousness?
Yeah, the Buddha definitely, he rejects the idea that there's a permanent, unchanging consciousness. But he doesn't reject the existence of consciousness. But he just says that consciousness is, we say that it's a process of knowing, a process of being aware, that it's not a persisting entity that's aware. So he says that consciousness also, like other things, arises through conditions.
And then you also say in the morning that Buddha think that their view of this very refined consciousness is a subtle obstacle for the liberation.
Yeah, yeah.
Could you elaborate on that?
Actually, there's a sutta that, in a way, deals with this point. This is in Anguttara Nikaya, the chapter on conditionality. It could be sutta number 61, chapter 12, number 61, where the Buddha says that, let me see if I could. Now my memory is not so good. Yeah, he says that the ordinary unenlightened person might regard this body consisting of the four great elements Yeah, he says the uninstructed worldling might become disillusioned with this body made of the four elements. He might become dispassionate towards it, might become liberated from it. How is this so? Because one sees in the case of this body that it accumulates, that it builds up, that it diminishes, that one takes it up and one lays it down. So on that basis, the worldling can become disenchanted, detached from and liberated from this body. But that which is called the mind, the citta, the mano or vijnana, the mind, mentality, consciousness, in regard to this, the ordinary worldly person is not able to become detached and liberated. For what reason? Because for a long time, the uninstructed worldly person has clung to this and grasped it and taken it, this is mine, this I am, this is my atta, this is myself. But then this Buddha says that it's better to become detached he says it's better to regard the body as self rather than the mind. For what reason? Because this body might last for 1 year, 2 years, up to 100 years. But that which is called the citta, the mano-vijnana, that is the mind, mentality, consciousness, by night and by day, it constantly arises and ceases. Then he says it's just like the monkey wandering through the forest that grabs one branch, lets it go, and grabs another branch. So this mind, by day and by night, it arises. Constantly, it's arising and passing away. So basically, that is the reason that probably because the sages of the Upanishads probably had high degree of samadhi, and so they would see the citta, the mind within the samadhi, as being bright, brilliant, pure, clear, all pervasive. And so they would take that as the self, that is the eternal, unchanging reality. But the Buddha would have used his insight to look into that very pure, very bright, pervasive mind that's experienced in deep samadhi, and then seeing how this too arises through the force of conditions, how this too is at a very subtle level, it's arising and passing away. And in that way he broke through that barrier of the view of self in regard to that very subtle consciousness. Okay, any further questions? Okay, if not, then we will end for the day. So, thank you all for coming today. And please remember, no class next Saturday, but April 15th, we come back. Okay. You take the microphone.
Related to the pure consciousness, and in the Mahayana tradition, we do have a lot of terms called Buddha nature,
Yeah.
the Dharma nature, and
Yeah.
do you think that it's also this is a variation of this pure consciousness?
It's an area where I don't want to tread. Yeah, one would have to study it in order to make pronouncements about it. I would have to study it at length, and I haven't done so. But I have to say, some of the language does seem a bit similar to the language that's used in the Upanishads or the Vedantic tradition. Even I've seen, in some, it was like D.T. Suzuki, the writer on Zen, would even use the word self, which, in my way of understanding, it would be quite contrary to the teaching of a Buddha. I don't see the chime. So anyway, we could just do the 3 bows.